Welcome to the milestone 25th Miami Jewish Film Festival, the world's largest festival of its kind. We want to thank all of our members, sponsors, community partners, all of you film lovers, and especially our presenting sponsors, the Center for the Advancement of Jewish Education and the Greater Miami Jewish Federation for their continued support throughout all of these years. My name is Nancy Zoretsky, and I am the Inclusion Specialist for the Miami Jewish Abilities Alliance, a program of the Greater Miami Jewish Federation. I'm excited today to be hosting a virtual conversation with Sasha Levinson, the director of Sylvie of the Sunshine State, which will be part of our festival in its East Coast premiere. Thank you all for joining us today. And Sasha, welcome to my virtual coffee table. I'm glad we could have this conversation.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Well, first off, I have to tell you, I really enjoyed this film from many perspectives, but probably my most tickled perspective was as the parent to a child with a difference, right? And I think when I was viewing the film, I was also really struck that this was a real tapestry of your family over generations. Can you give us an idea of how the genesis of this film came to you?
Yeah. So the real story in that is about, my 25-year plus love affair with making films and really feeling a calling as a filmmaker. So as I'm moving through my life, I experience everything as through the lens of a beginning, a middle, and an end. I love Joseph Campbell. I'm always looking for the hero's journey in everyday life. So I've had a very long career as a commercial director and a short film director and writer, and have been trying to get my first feature film made for years and years. And there's just so many gatekeepers in Hollywood, and I was sort of under this notion that somebody else had to say yes to me. Mm-hmm. And I really started to gain some traction in very early 2020 with one of my narrative film projects. I met a new producing partner, and we were just really off and running. And when COVID happened, it felt like there was just a big stall. And I was sort of at a loss. I knew that as a single mom, I was going to be at home with my child 24/7 doing virtual school. She has learning differences. I have learning differences. How are we going to do this? And really, how am I going to maintain my mental health during this situation? And I decided I was just going to start filming. I said, you know what? Nobody's going to say yes to me right now to make a feature film. I'm ready to make my first feature film. I'm going to start shooting. And at first, it was sort of the first couple of weeks was about finding out what this film was going to be about. And then as we settled into it, I just decided that I was going to document. I was going to document for 4 months straight until the time that Sylvie was going to leave and go with her dad for the summer, which is how our dynamic is. And I just had the camera with me at all times, kind of forgot about it and just let it roll. Yeah.
So there, I just want to maybe bring a little bit of information to our viewers. You and I are comfortable with the phrase learning differences, right? Can you elaborate on what learning differences are for you in your vocabulary and how that translates? You mentioned that Sylvie is a visual learner and needs a 360 environment. And that's what she generally has in the classroom. Can you elaborate on what a learning difference is for our viewer?
Well, in Sylvie's case, her a learning difference in general is just everybody's brain is different. Mm-hmm. And the current school curriculum and sort of school system is really geared towards a very particular kind of very straightforward learning. And so many of our kids today, there's a lot of different schools of thought as to why that is. But so many of our kids, their brains just work differently. So for Sylvie, who has it's called auditory processing disorder, and it's in essence a dyslexia of the ears. Mm-hmm. So when she was very little, she would hear sentences out of order. Recall is different. So she needs heavy reinforcement and visuals and able to retain a concept or recall the events that happened in the story. But learning differences can mean many different things on many different scales, from simply someone who, has trouble with focus to someone who's on the autism spectrum severely and anywhere in between. But what I love about this word is it really like embraces, it's almost become the norm, really, if we boil it down.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. In my own work for Federation and in my own home, I think anybody, actually, if you put two people in a room together, they're going to approach whatever the conversation is, or the topic of maybe a mutual project or chore or something. We all have our own perspective, but when we talk about learning differences, we're actually honoring each one as being valid. Right? As opposed to saying, oh, mine is the more acceptable one and yours is different, so it's not acceptable. And I think I think that's important for our viewers to have a snapshot in, because maybe they don't use the language in their everyday life, but now with that vocabulary, they can see the people in their own circles perhaps a little differently, and not in a judgmental way or a value way.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've always felt really comfortable talking about it and talking about our experiences with Sylvie, and she's very confident and comfortable in talking about it. I've noticed at times that other people that we're talking to are uncomfortable, but it just is. And I think the beauty is when, and I'm curious if you've found this with your family, it's all about the workaround.
I say the most important quality that I value in anybody is flexible, to be flexible. Because if the goal, like for example, your child has homework, and there are so many things that I want to touch upon about the whole COVID educational capsule that you created there, that everyone had these shared experiences of what is Zoom, the kids all talking over each other, popping up on screen. And for your child, who that was probably a lot of visual and auditory information coming at once, all out of order. That must have been a great challenge. But what I'm really curious about is that when we talk about differences, right, we're going to notice them in other people, and we're not going to like shoo them under the cover. Like maybe decades ago, our families wouldn't mention the word cancer; they'd be like the big C, right? So when we talk about learning differences now, and you talk about your daughter's auditory processing issues and her need for visuals, when we say visuals, that's a list, a schedule, a reminder, an order. Can you give us an idea of what makes her classroom work for her, as opposed to what happened on the virtual classroom?
Yeah. So in order for her classroom to work for her, which we still struggle with every day, she needs to definitely have visual reinforcement of concepts. So that might look like a chart. That might look like, the best thing for her is like 3-dimensional sort of real world examples to illustrate, so little cubes for math and orders and lists. We've had the same daily responsibility list on a chalkboard in our house since she was 3. And yeah, she still like needs the constant sort of reminder of like, we brush our teeth, we do our hair,
Well, I like that you say it might look like this, because that's also going to clue our viewer into the idea that what you're doing now is working now, right? When she gets to 4th grade, it might need to be adjusted. Or when she is,
she's actually in 4th grade now.
So maybe the tools and your ability to be flexible will push you to another path.
Exactly.
Whatever you used previously might not work now, but that something's going to work. You're just going to keep trying until you get to it.
Yeah. So time management is a huge issue. So we're having a really big success right now, which I will share. Mornings for me have traditionally been extremely stressful to get her through the steps that need to happen before we get out of the house. And what I started doing this last week was setting a timer on her iPad so that she can see it. I remind her about the steps, but I sort of say to her, like, you are responsible for doing your responsibilities. I will do my responsibilities, and we meet in the car, and I'll let your teacher know if we're late for school. We're learning how to be responsible for our own routine, and it's okay, we'll get there. And that sort of visual, that experience this morning was so funny. She was like, oh, mommy, I'm so stressed out. I'm so stressed out. I'm like, yeah, I know.
That's warning. That's happening all across the world right now. People are stressed getting out the door, right? It's a universal. Thank you. Yeah. But so on that path too, what I want to also speak to you about is the universal experience that you created, sort of a time capsule of COVID for the single parent, right? And I really admire you shining a light on that experience, because to be a single parent is a challenge always, right? Because you're on full on 100% the whole time, right? But now COVID, here you are your child's teacher, you're your child's social life, you are also you go through a medical emergency, and you are sharing intimate thoughts that maybe would have just been saved for the end of the day, but here you spent the entire day together, and now she comes up with these intimate thoughts of like, well, are we going to have another baby, right? And you're probably burnt out from all those roles. So right? And I love that, because you really are shining a spotlight on what it is to be a single parent, that this is the COVID experience of single parent, which was more than 100%. Can you share with us some of the ideas that you felt were most important to highlight in this COVID single parent capsule?
Yeah. And also, I am a single parent. I am, because I'm not with her dad, but he's an amazing co-parent. He is extraordinarily involved and supportive. And we have always had a really tight-knit relationship. So there is that. But when the news and the media is saying like you can't be around anyone at all, suddenly it's like her grandparents and her dad were not able to be with us and provide the level of support that they had up until that point. I think that the way that we sort of addressed the film and what to sort of highlight, as you will, was kind of an unconscious decision and part of a more filmmaker's process. So the process was that I would film, and then very early on, I brought in an editor and writer, Jonathan Sanford, who is an amazingly talented individual, and we've been friends for 30 years. He's gone through the Sundance Episodic Writers Lab in 2019, and just an awesome. And I was like, we're just going to start collecting footage and see how the story emerges. And so we kind of played the game, like, what's a scene? What do we have that's a scene?
Yeah, can you talk to that? Because I think that when we look at film, right, this is obviously a documentary, right, but it's also a narrative. So can you elaborate for our viewer how a filmmaker approaches? Do you say, today we're going to touch upon this, or do you take the film and say, oh, this is what I have, so this is where I'm going to go with the narrative story? How does that process work?
Yeah, so the way that it worked was that I wanted to test my skills, because I've been directing for a very long time in commercials and just like aching to get back into like real narrative storytelling. I wanted to use this time to test my skills. Like, if I just have this camera, this iPhone in my hand.
Oh, thank you for telling me. You shot it on your iPhone? Okay.
What can I capture compelling footage? The goal is to just forget about it, to just document life in a very effortless way, where I'm just going through life, but it's like here in my hand. It's still my same phone that I have all the footage on my phone. It's insane. But so the idea was that it was collecting. It was just collecting life over a contained period of time. And then once Sylvie went up to her dad's house for the summer, I could transition back out of full-time mom and into creative filmmaker. So that's when we started really looking at the footage and playing the game. What's a scene? And that's sort of how we started by really writing the story based on the scenes that we had and how we could make it all flow with a narrative arc. And then we brought on an amazing editor named Chris Brown, who had made a film called The Other Kids, which was a hybrid between narrative and documentary, which is a space that really intrigues me. One of my next films is actually going to live in that space as well. And so then we really started to kind of manipulate, in a way, the footage to make it as dynamic as it could possibly be. So for example, like with any documentary, there's spaces where you need to fill in the blanks. So a couple of the Zooms that her dad and I did were done after the fact to help the story, because we found from some of our earlier viewers that they wanted more insight into the parental. Bless you.
Thank you. Ooh. Sorry.
Yeah, people wanted to know more about, the parental mindset and a little bit more about me, a little bit more about her dad. Also, when she goes to the hospital, I didn't actually wait for an ambulance. I was so scared. I drove her to the hospital, and I certainly was not filming in those early moments, but because we were in the ER for 6 hours before they transferred us to another hospital, by the time I knew she was stable, I was like, well, I mean, I guess I can start shooting. She's okay. She's sleeping. She's stable. But then I had material of us doing a hospital transfer. So we were able to use that to sort of make it seem like the ride to the hospital.
Okay.
Little things like that.
You pretty much had every possible COVID experience, right? I think you pretty much did. And that really is the capsule of everybody's COVID experience, including the cycles of life. What I really also see as an undercurrent of your film is the cycles of life. You are Sparkles dies. Of course, when Sylvie's out of the house, which is classic, and you have the bird falling out of the nest.
I know.
Right. So, can you tell me, were these planned moments or happenstance?
Everything in the film is unplanned. Everything in the film is unplanned. The goal was just simply to document our life. And she and I both really reach for a sense of magic in the everyday. And we've been described as having unbridled enthusiasm by a cinematographer friend of mine. And I think that I just wanted to capture life and see if something would emerge. And what did emerge is what you're talking about, these cycles of life, and this idea that, yeah, there is this pandemic going on, but within life, just without the news, without people telling us what to be afraid of, there is just natural life unfolding in all its beauty at every moment.
To me, that was a very strong point in the film. And then occasionally you show scenes of just looking out into your garden or looking into the trees. Especially, can you give me a little, just share a little bit more with us about the nighttime scenes where you and Sylvie are in bed and maybe we're just looking at a night sky and there's this whispering going on, which is so intimate and so mother-child. And thank you for sharing that. I think for me as a mother, that's when that also, and when you're driving, when you're driving and your kid is in the front seat, you get the best conversations.
Which is so bad that I let her sit in the front seat, but it was like her COVID gift. I was like, you're big enough. Sit, like life is kind of sucking right now. Sit in the front.
In the front. Those are two very, they're just intimate moments between mother and child. And I'm not, framing it in some sort of, Renaissance painting moment, but these were very intimate moments between mother and child. And I thank you for sharing them. They brought back memories of my own intimate moments with my children. Can you elaborate a little bit on how you decided to include those? If they were always going to, if they're part of your everyday, so you needed to include them, or just share with us a bit on that, because they were so poignant and beautiful, and I really appreciate you including them.
Yeah. So once we kind of got rolling, like Sylvie sleeping in my bed is the family drama that everyone's involved in. She's finally sleeping in her own bed, but like just for like a couple of months now.
Way to go, Mom.
Yeah.
You can sleep in the middle of the bed.
It's so crazy.
Baby bassinet too, with the baby doll. So you were not just you and Sylvie.
The co-sleeper. And it all started from that, like, she was born in California, and it was so much that's like, everybody was co-sleeping, and it's cruel to put your baby in the other room. And that was the vibe when she was born. And it just spiraled for years. But those scenes, so once we kind of got in the role of things, and I would have the phone in the bedroom next to me with the alarm on it. And it's always at night where she just says the most intuitive, magical, like loving, that's her moment. Mm-hmm. So one night I just like press record, and then I quickly realized that these would need to be chapter markers in the film, and that we tried several different variations on what imagery we would show over them. I shot like her galaxy lights projected on the bedroom ceiling. We did some driving shots, but ultimately it's just the simplicity of seeing the house at night and allowing the viewer this moment to kind of settle and listen in.
Eavesdropping 100%.
Yeah.
And the smile on my face as I was eavesdropping, I was like, oh, it's angelic.
Yeah.
No, beautiful.
Thank you.
And then for me, also love the whole tapestry of multi-generational Florida experiences here, right? Very, very Boca, very Florida. And
so
also
specific.
So specific. And P.S., by the way, I feel compelled to get your grandmother an autographed photo of Al Gore. Yeah. I think that would make her very happy.
I know. It's so funny because that's the only 2 times she's ever mentioned him.
But now you know what to get her for a present. So this was beautiful. Here we have your child having the experiences on Zoom in a classroom, really challenging, right? At one point she remarks, recess, how's that going to happen? Which was natural. All of us have probably went the same way. But then you also have her great grandmother learning on her iPad how to connect. Can you tell me about that? That's really bookending with 4 generations of women here having their experience with COVID and wanting to stay connected.
Yes. Interestingly, in my family, we've almost always had, my great grandmother did not pass away until I was in my 20s, and she was yeah. Wow. So we've often had 4 generations of women in our family. And I think on some level it is something that I've taken for granted. I just take for granted my grandmother is such a strong presence in my life, very supportive from when I was really young, wanting to get into film. She loves to tell the story of how when I first started doing wardrobe styling, as a stylist, you have to like pay for stuff on your own credit card, and I didn't have a credit card, so she like gave me her credit card. She loves telling that story. But she is very present and wanting to stay modern with life in the world, and very social. So COVID really brought her into an isolated space, and she was very determined to learn how to use the iPad and stay connected with her people. At the beginning, we were seeing each other a lot because there was not this fear around it in the way that kind of gained. You know, so in the beginning it was like we were together still, we were hanging out, and then it was like there was a lot of fear that came in for her, which is now gone, which is good.
No, thankfully.
Yeah.
And then the dynamic that you have with your mom, which I think a lot of women can relate to. I was recently listening to a woman's podcast on language between mothers and daughters, and how mothers frequently talk to daughters about their physical appearance because the world judges women on their physical appearance. And you have that conversation going back to your mom and then going forward with your daughter. And that's also very intimate. Can you share with us a little bit about the dynamic that you have going to your mother and then to your daughter? And at one point there's a scene outside where your mother, frankly, you have the most frank, level-headed conversation about it. Can you share some of that experience with us? Because I've had those conversations, but certainly not that level-headed.
Yeah. So my grandmother and my mother were very conscious of my weight as a very little girl. So from the time that I was 8 years old, I was taken to nutritionists, put on like Weight Watchers, Nutrisystem, all of these diet plans.
Thank you for sharing that. That's very personal. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Well, it's a big piece of my work. So one of my other scripts that I'm working on is really about that. It's important to me because of that, I spent years and years and years in a total position of body shame, real severe body shame. And I'm pretty average. My body is pretty average. You know, I'm healthy. Certainly, but it certainly nothing extraordinary, just normal.
Yeah.
And I am so aware of how damaging it can be to someone's self-worth to feel bad about their body, that I'm completely like triggered by it when it comes to Sylvie, and just like trying so hard that's almost like too hard.
Well, as mothers, we always think we're swinging the pendulum. You know, we're trying to make sure that this doesn't happen, so we're going to do this, right? But the fact that you're even conscious of it is really to be applauded. You know, that you're aware that your language about physical appearance and weight with your daughter is going to be different than the language that you received as a listener when you were a child.
Yeah, but I did realize that we needed help. There's a lot of places where after making this film, I realized we needed help. So we actually got a family therapist that we've been working with for about 1.5 years now. And she helps us with so many great solutions, including something that's pretty cool. Again, it's about putting the responsibility to make good choices into Sylvie's court. So we have a snack drawer that lasts a week. Yeah. And it's a range of snacks from super sugary to very healthy. It's balanced. And Sylvie's responsibility now to make her own choices. And it kind of takes me and my voice.
You're fading back. Yeah, you're fading back.
Out of the equation. I think we had like a blowout in the Dunkin' Donuts like drive-thru, and I was like, yeah, Houston, we have a problem. Like, I'm not judging donuts this hard, and like it's just.
You should be handing out business cards at Dunkin' Donuts drive-thru, right? Like, here we go again.
It's really
especially in South Florida, right? Yeah.
Yes. So I think like the thing is, and I explained this to Sylvie, was like, I said, Sylv, people are really responding to this film a lot more strongly than I thought they would.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason is, and we talked to our family therapist about it, is this idea that it presents such a realistic and messy version of life that it brings out this feel-good, common humanity amongst people who watch it. It's almost like the opposite of social media. So you look at people's Instagram feeds and you feel terrible about yourself. Everyone's so perfect. They're having so much fun. It is a huge problem, even though I make light of it. But you watch this film and you feel like, wow, we all go through the same things. We all have suffering. Like, life is not perfect. We make judgments. We do the wrong things. We say things we don't mean. We're hurtful, but we're also loving and trying our best and getting back up on the horse and having successes.
Well, you mentioned that. So you and Sylvie have this running conversation where she doesn't want to include arguing in the film. And you say it's important as a family to argue and move through it. And that's important to show other people.
That is so true. It's funny. I did not put those. This is all, the film being seen by people is also new.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But it's really cool to start hearing things like that and be like, oh yeah, I didn't connect those dots. Because as a mom, I still feel guilty about that.
Don't be good to yourself. Really. Because then at one point she actually says to you, don't ever stop rolling.
Yeah.
So for me as the viewer, I saw her as how she recognized there's value in the conflict, right? And when we first began speaking today, you mentioned the hero's journey, right? That it's arduous, and that Instagram pictorial life is not real at all. That this is the real world, right? And you even show yoga pants, the COVID wine glasses, right? So you really give us that capsule of this. This was a single mother's life at home during COVID with a child with a learning difference. And I do think there's so many universals in there. I do, and I like the conflict. And I like that you move through the conflict to the point where she's like, don't ever stop rolling. She literally says, don't ever stop rolling.
I know. We almost called the film that. We almost called the film Don't Ever Stop Filming. Yeah, but I like this film a lot. I mean, this title a lot.
Oh, yeah. So Sylvie of the Sunshine State. So it almost sounds as if it's translated from another language, because it's not Sylvie in the Sunshine State. This is Sylvie representing the Sunshine State, right?
Yes,
so tell me about the title.
We were going back and forth a lot about, the title was originally called Sick Month.
Oh, wow.
Because we thought it was going to be like, we didn't know it was going to go on and on and on and on.
I know at one point you're like, oh, it's just, a couple of weeks. Kind of like when we were having those news briefings where it's like, there are 2-week plan or a 14-day plan, right? You remember those? Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, the 30-year plan.
Thank you. We're still home. You and I are on Zoom and we're not, having a glass of wine or a cup of coffee together. But here we are in Zoom. Yeah.
So yeah, about 6 months ago, we got on a Zoom with our team, which is 3 producers, an associate producer who also function as editors and writers. And this title just felt like, the Sunshine State, meaning the sunshine state of mind. I wanted to convey this essence of well-being, that for people not to forget that they have the ability to thrive, even in the most uncomfortable circumstances. The people that I really admire as teachers and mentors are people who historically have thrived in very dark places.
Mhm, mhm.
So Sylvie being this sort of beacon of a little ray of light
Mhm.
in it all really spoke to me. So she is this kind of sunshine state of mind figure, and she is also lives in the sunshine state.
No, it's perfect. Absolutely. And I thought to myself, oh, but she says of the sunshine state. So it is different. It is
It's
more of
sort
a
of,
representation.
yeah, and it's sort of like like in old old time England, or like you would see it in like Disney
Mhm.
films when they announce the princess coming into the ball, and it's like so and so of so and so. Like that's what came to mind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it works very well. It really does. I like the title
Thank you.
because it sets you up. Like she is representing this experience, and you are too. And then at one point you get a day off, an overnight off. I love when Sylvie's walking into your mom's house and Sylvie's like, "How about 2 nights?" And your mom's like, "Let's see how one night goes."
My
Thank
mom is
you.
all about like protecting her. She's like very boundaries oriented.
Thank you for keeping that in. Thank you for keeping that in. That is something that I've not had from my mom, right? But I know I've seen other relationships like that. So that was honest and beautiful. And then you chronicle your 24 hours, right? And what do? You take a shower, right? You do a little yoga.
Totally.
Tell me, what was that like? That little breath that you were able to take? Yeah.
That respite it was so, I need that. I need that recharge. I need that quiet time, that meditative time. I'm a big meditator. So luckily I have both sets of grandparents here, and I do get that time a lot. And also when she goes with her dad. But at that point, it just felt like I was just plugged back in, like I could just think straight after the constant. And it was funny. I was at my exercise class today, which is at a woman's house in my neighborhood, and I've been going to her for years. And we stopped all during COVID. She was just around the corner, and I thought to myself, my goodness. Had we just come over here, me and Sylvie, once or twice a week and exercised across the room from each other, it wouldn't have done any harm, and it would have been a game changer.
As an artist, it's a hard way to make a living, right? It is definitely a hard way to make a living. And your practice could be really good one year, your abilities to make a lot of films could go great, and then the next, but I see in this film that you wanted to highlight that you are a creative person. You have had success. You have some financial comfort provided by yourself as a woman filmmaker, and that your daughter is making this film with you, and you're showing her like you can do this even in a pandemic.
Yeah.
So was that intentional, or is that just you being you and it coming out in the film?
That's just, yes, that is just us being us, and that's just what our life is. Yeah, I mean, there was nothing there, I was raised by these very strong women and never thought for a second from a very young age I wanted to be a filmmaker. So I never thought for a second that should I move somewhere else? No, it's okay. We'll just roll with it.
Okay.
I never thought for a second that there were going to be any limitations around me being a filmmaker. So I just went, it is for sure, it is my calling. And I was able from a young age to get into making commercials, which wound up being this great, it's sort of like my film school. And then became just such a wonderful way to work consistently as a filmmaker over the period of years. And 2019 was a great year for me. There was a lot of positive momentum. So I was able to put put away some resources, thank goodness, because I would have been, you know, I would have lost my house. I would have had to take my daughter out of private school. It was only because I had a good 2019 that I was able to maintain and make this film, which definitely feels like the beginning for both Sylvie and I.
Mhm.
I think that she wants to be a teacher when she grows up.
Mhm.
That is something that I have,
There are a
like,
lot of ways to be a teacher. You don't have to be in a classroom.
yes, and any of the ways that she wants to be a teacher is awesome. But I just love that she's learning this
Mhm.
craft from a, like, in an intuitive way, in a very visceral, hands-on sort of way, which will be, I feel, invaluable for her throughout her life.
Oh, I think so. I think, you know, in the very least, you've shown her that sharing your emotions, being vulnerable, is a way of creating confidence within yourself, and then inviting people into the story. You know, through the medium of film, is also inviting people to realize that, okay, my learning difference is a good thing, as opposed to maybe something that might have been, you know, shied away from or hidden. You know, that my ability as a woman to be a filmmaker and to be successful is also, you know, a good thing to show people. I think there are many facets in the film that you've invited people into vulnerable moments and shown them that you persevere, right? And you persevere, you do what needs to be done, and it doesn't mean that it's going to be fabulous and neat. It's going to be a little messy, you know, and that's okay. You know, well, I really want to thank you for sharing this film with us, for inviting us into this moment in your life, and in this really beautiful relationship that you have with Sylvie, and with your grandmother, your mother, and the men in your circle, that are, you know, part and parcel of the whole family experience. Thank you very much. I think that the COVID capsule is one aspect, the mother-daughter aspect is another, multi-generational experience that you shared with us. And then being really honest and frank with your daughter's learning differences just really gives us like the perfume of the movie, you know, that here's this girl that just sees the world differently, and this is her life. So thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is a really wonderful first discussion.
We'll invite him for coffee later. No, but so I want to just thank everyone who's logged on and who's watching us today. A great big thank you to Sasha Levinson, the director of Sylvie of the Sunshine State. And once again, thank you to all our members, sponsors, and community partners, the volunteers. We miss seeing you in person, and I hope you get a t-shirt. And all of the film lovers participating in the milestone 25th Miami Jewish Film Festival. Thank you, Sasha.
Thank you.